Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Troubleshooter125, who says, so now the National Review has come out against Trump, and Politico's Matthew McWilliams argues that Trump is presenting an authoritarian persona, which is the primary attraction to a great number of his supporters. My sense is that while McWilliams' argument may be true, it doesn't matter to Trump fans any more than what the National Review has to say. Trump is doing something very primal in terms of creating his appeal, simplistic though his policies may be, and it's working. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't really see the National Review's coming out against Trump as making any difference to most of Trump's supporters. I don't think very many of them are National Review readers. I don't think many of them are Politico readers. They don't seem like the type of people who are usually very engaged in the political process. It seems like he is appealing to people who feel like they have largely been ignored or overlooked in the political process. But the thing is, there's a good reason, there's a legitimate reason why many of the Trump supporters have been overlooked by the Republican Party for many years, and that's because the Republican Party, as much as I loathe their policies, the Republican Party is smart enough to know that you can't win elections, especially on a national level, by appealing to what we could now call the Trump voter. These angry, not really disenfranchised, but feeling like they're disenfranchised white people who are just tired of all the political correctness. That's the group that Trump is appealing to, because Donald Trump goes on TV and says whatever the fuck he wants because he doesn't care, because he's rich anyway. If he finally does say something that crosses the line and gets him booted out of the presidential race, or finally turns off enough of his supporters that he just has to, throw in the towel as far as the presidential campaign goes, he doesn't care. He's rich. If he doesn't get to be president, he still gets to be fucking Donald Trump, so he doesn't care. And there's something about that feeling of just sort of recklessness that I think is appealing to a lot of people who feel held down by the expectation that they not be such assholes to people. So yeah, I don't think the Politico thing will have any effect. I do think the Politico thing and the National Review thing especially is significant because it's yet more evidence that the mainstream Republican Party is rejecting Trump and is just not going to accept Donald Trump as the nominee. Which could make things very interesting if he actually does as well in the primaries as the polls suggest he will. But we'll see. I'm still holding out hope that people will have come to Jesus moments when they get to the voting booth, when they actually are faced with the decision, oh my God, am I actually going to cast my vote for Donald Trump? And they're going to vote for somebody else. So I'm anxious to see how the first couple, how Iowa and New Hampshire, and then after those two, the primaries that follow soon after that, I'm curious to see how they turn out, because we won't really know anything about how strong of a candidate Trump is or how good of a chance he has at scoring the nomination until people actually start voting. Daniel Sharp. Hi, Steve. I believe you've said in the past that while you'd like for the Dem nominee to be Sanders, it is most likely going to be Clinton. The latest CNN ORC poll actually has Sanders ahead of Clinton by 8 points in Iowa, and he's been beating her in New Hampshire in polls since early December. The general election matchups on Real Clear Politics show Sanders doing better against Trump than Clinton, and actually show Clinton losing to Cruz while Sanders wins against him. Of course, it also shows both losing to Rubio, so grain of salt, I guess. So taking all that into consideration, do you still feel that Clinton has the best chance of becoming the nominee? And assuming that Sanders does become the nominee, do you think he could win the general election? I don't know. I still think that Clinton would be the surer bet in the general election for name recognition and for support within the party alone. I do think that if Sanders did get the nomination, that he could win the general election. I don't think that if Bernie Sanders is the Democratic nominee that we can all just sort of throw our hands up and say, fuck it, we lost this one. I mean, I do think Bernie Sanders is sharp enough and strong enough and has policies that would be appealing to enough people and is a strong enough speaker and debater that I certainly think he could very much win a general election against any of the Republican potential candidates. But I just think Hillary is a much stronger, much safer bet. And as I've said before, I think in videos, even though, yeah, if I could hand a magic wand to any of these candidates and say, here's your magic wand, you can do whatever you want, fix the country, I would hand that magic wand to Bernie Sanders before I would hand it to Hillary Clinton. But I would rather have a Democratic president who I agree with 85-90% of the time and think would be a really good president, instead of a Republican president who I think would be just a step in the wrong direction, a great big step backwards. And Hillary is that person. Hillary is the person. I have no serious problems with her. I think she would be a fine president. I think she would do a good job. I think she would be a good leader. I think she would have her head in the right place, and she'd be sort of moving us in the right direction. Do I think she would be as good as Bernie? Ideologically, no. I think I line up with Bernie Sanders more closely on ideological lines and in terms of the sort of things I would like to see. But I think Hillary has a better shot of actually getting in there, and once she is in there, of actually getting things done, of getting things passed through Congress. So, yeah, I mean, I still think Hillary is the most pragmatic choice. And again, Bernie could win. I would go out and vote for Bernie in a heartbeat in the general election, you know. But let's not forget, this is a country that in 2000 was faced with a choice between Al Gore, who had been a long-serving senator and vice president of the United States for 8 years, and by all accounts, even among people who didn't like him or didn't agree with his policies, was an incredibly informed and intelligent and articulate person. And we couldn't choose between him and George W. Bush, the legacy candidate of all legacy candidates, who had absolutely nothing to offer other than his last name and his evil friends. And we were so torn on that decision that it had to go to the fucking Supreme Court to decide who got to be the president. So let's not overestimate the wisdom of the voting public and say, well, if Bernie gets nominated, we can elect him. Well, maybe. Let's hope so, if it comes to that. Patrick Dodds. Steve, this is a follow-up question to my Rocky question a few weeks ago. What did you think of Rocky 4? I personally love it. It's so much fun, even though on a critical level, it's probably the worst of the series. Also, what's your pick for weakest Rocky movie? Rocky 4 is quality cheese. I love Rocky 4 I think for the same reasons you do, Patrick. It's a hoot. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's not a good movie at all. Like, it just judging it as a film critic and sort of trying to leave my affection for it aside, it's a terrible movie. It's a terrible movie. I mean, it's like 90% montage for start. There's like, I think there are 2 training montages, plus there's that montage of Rocky driving around at night. There's, yeah, lots of montage, lots of filler, and it's only like, the movie is like 90 minutes. And there's a lot of filler for a 90-minute movie. And, you know, Drago is like the stereotypical Russian supervillain opponent. You know, the premise that Rocky is basically fighting the Cold War in this exhibition boxing match, and when Rocky the American guy beats the Russian guy, the Russian people all cheer for him because they just admire Rocky so much. Yeah, it's cheese. It's cornball nonsense, but it's a lot of fun to watch. And I do really enjoy watching Rocky 4 for the same reason that I enjoy watching movies like The Room or Roadhouse or that sort of thing. The weakest in the Rocky series, probably Rocky 5 for me, because even though I think Rocky 5 may be a better film than Rocky 4 or even Rocky 3, it's just so dull. I mean, there's so little that happens that is really memorable in it. And it feels like sort of the series going back to the well, you know, by kind of trying to reverse Rocky from his Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 persona, from like, you know, successful rich Rocky. They're trying to wind him back to lovable old Palooka Rocky from the first 2 movies. And that doesn't really work. So yeah, if I had to pick the weakest, I would say Rocky 5. But yeah, Rocky 4 is a good one. Rocky 3 is still my favorite, though. Rocky 3. Clubber Lang. Mark Orangis, have you been keeping up with the Guthrie versus Elliott trial? If so, what's your take on the charges and the verdict? Elliott was found not guilty, by the way. Cheers. And for those of you who might not know, the trial that Mark is referring to there, Guthrie versus Elliott, was a case in Canada where someone was actually brought to trial for online harassment. A guy named Elliott was brought to trial for harassing a woman, Steph Guthrie, online. And in the end, yeah, he was found not guilty. And it was a very disappointing verdict for me. And for a lot of people who think that online harassment is something that should be taken seriously and isn't taken nearly as seriously as it needs to be. The really strange part about that verdict was that the judge basically said that he believed that Elliott was guilty of harassment. But he found him not guilty because he felt like even though he was guilty of harassment, he didn't feel that the victim, that Steph Guthrie and the other victim, Heather Riley, that he didn't feel that they had a legitimate reason to be fearful. So basically, yeah, he was harassing you, but yeah, I don't think he really did any harm, so we'll just let him go. That's really troubling. It's troubling that the judge felt that no harm had been done, which is strange to me. So yeah, it's a troubling verdict. It's troubling that the judge acknowledges that harassment took place, but also feels that no harm was done. He basically doesn't take the concerns of the women who were victimized by this man seriously. That's too bad, to put it mildly. I think the reactions of many of Elliott's supporters in the wake of the news of his acquittal speak for themselves. Many of Elliott's supporters, after hearing that they had won, that their guy had won the case and had been found not guilty, they responded by going on Twitter and harassing Guthrie and Riley, the two women who he had been on trial for harassing. That's how they celebrated. They took a victory lap by engaging in exactly the same sort of behavior that he was just on trial for. So yeah, it's troubling that this guy, who is supported by quite a few of the worst fucking people on the internet, was absolved of any wrongdoing in a Canadian court of law. It's really too bad, and I hope that this sort of thing will not set too long-standing of a precedent. I hope that eventually the law and the courts and judges will catch up on this issue and will realize that this actually is something that deserves to be taken seriously, that online harassment is not something that should be taken lightly. It took a little while for the courts and the judicial system to catch on with real life harassment. There were quite a few years where, real life harassment that didn't result in some kind of awful violent incident at the end was treated kind of lightly. And that is not so much the case anymore. And hopefully that will happen in the coming years for online harassment. Crowbro! Hi Steve, as a fellow atheist and feminist, I had some thoughts on the two subjects which I'd like to hear your opinion on. Atheism and feminism are two simple concepts. Atheism is a lack of belief in God, and feminism is equality between the sexes. But to the uninformed, the two labels can come with a lot of baggage, often negative. Now, when an atheist is debating a theist, the atheist will almost always shoot down the negative baggage, often saying it's a different issue apart from atheism, or say atheists are a very diverse group with many viewpoints. When a feminist is debating a non-feminist, the feminist will usually just accept whatever baggage the non-feminist puts on them, letting the waters get muddy and not doing much to correct it. Am I onto something, Steve? Well, yes and no. I don't know if I really accept that comparison of atheism to feminism. I mean, yes, they are both very simple concepts at their most basic level. Atheism is just not believing in gods, and feminism is belief in gender equality. But feminism is a lot more complicated than that. Atheism, I think you can make a case that we start with atheism and then we pile a lot of other things on top of it that aren't necessarily included in the scope of atheism, but just sort of ride along with it in the minds of many people. But with feminism, there is actually a great deal of feminist thought and philosophy and literature, and there are many, many different schools of feminism that all fall under that feminist umbrella. Because feminism is a political and a sociological concept. It's not a single belief about one aspect of life. Atheism, at its most basic level, is an answer to one question. Feminism is much more complicated than that. So one thing that feminists should say, and do say quite often when people try to strawman feminism, is that, like you said about atheists, feminists are an incredibly ideologically diverse group of people. And if you say, well, this feminist said something that I think is awful, or this feminist is a radical and dangerous and blah, 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 it's quite possible that that is just one person representing one school of thought within the larger school of feminism. And you can just point to how many other types of feminists there are. You can probably point to quite a few feminists who have called out that problematic feminist on his or her behavior, because that's just the way it works. And I don't know if feminists really allow non-feminists or anti-feminists to get away with that very often. Most feminists that I see actually engaging in debate with anti-feminists, which I think is mostly a waste of time, but when I do see feminists engaging with anti-feminists, I don't see them letting anti-feminists get away with things very often. I see them trying to make corrections and trying to set the record straight as much as possible. But yeah, I mean, maybe the muddying of the water comes with the fact that a lot of people who aren't really informed on the subject get a lot of their information about feminism from people who don't know shit about feminism. And that muddies the water. If you go to actual feminists, if you read actual feminist books, if you go to actual feminist websites or listen to actual feminist speakers and become truly informed on what people are saying and what these ideas are and what their implications are from people who know about them, not people who are just seeking to attack them and demean them and denigrate them and strawman them and misrepresent them, then that muddy water isn't really there so much. But if you look at people who are only seeking to attack and discredit feminism without actually knowing anything about it as your source for feminism, then yeah, the water's going to get pretty muddy. So a lot of that depends on where you're getting your information from and sort of which direction you're leaning and who you're listening to. Sam Clemens RIGL. Hey Steve, long time no comment. I usually have General Tso's chicken whenever eating at a new Americanized Chinese restaurant before venturing outside of my comfort zone. But I recently changed things up and discovered the mouth-numbing deliciousness of mala chicken. What are your go-to orders when eating at a Chinese restaurant? The last few years, my go-to has been sesame chicken, but it has also in the past been General Tso's chicken, which I also love. And originally, and still, if I find a place that makes a good one, I love sweet and sour pork. Sweet and sour pork is just delicious to me. But the reason why this is a main segment question and not a lightning round question is because you made me think of the first time I ever went to a sit-down Chinese restaurant. I went there when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old with my mother. It was a place that no longer exists, but it was a place in our local shopping mall here called the Bamboo Garden. And Mom and I went there to have my first actual in-a-restaurant Chinese meal. And I ordered Kung Pao chicken, because I looked on the menu and I thought, oh wow, that's weird. It has peanuts in it. Peanuts in a dinner dish with chicken? That I had never heard of that before. So I got my General Tso's chicken and I was eating it, and I ate one of the peppers. They put these nice long red peppers in the General Tso's chicken to make it spicy, and I ate one of them whole. I chewed it up and swallowed it. I had no idea what it was. And for the next 20 minutes, I was at the table just guzzling water and just the most miserable little kid you've ever seen. I did not let that deter me from eating and enjoying Chinese food. I did not let that put me off eating Chinese food, although I don't think I've had Kung Pao since then more than 2 or 3 times. And I have always been very careful to avoid the peppers. It didn't put me off Chinese food. It didn't put me off peanuts either, although I still don't really get that. I guess I'm too much of an American to really get why are there peanuts in this? I don't know. Can I have the thunder now, please, to get me out of here? There we go. Hey! I didn't know where else to go with that story, so I needed someone to help me out, and the thunder's got my back. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Hey everybody, guess what? It's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Lucas Hackett, one angry brony. Yo, Steve, which of these sounds better to you and why? Binging on the WWE network all day, being locked in a cage with Bill Cosby, or even worse, having to be trapped 30 days straight with the Duggar family? Take your pick. Gee, I wonder which one I'm going to pick. I'm going to have to go with binging on the WWE network all day because that's what I would do anyway if I had the choice. The Insane Pumpkin Carver. Steve, what would be a better way to regulate Wall Street? A, break up the big banks and reinstate Glass-Steagall, or B, tell them to cut it out. Boy, the softball questions are just being lobbed right over the plate today, aren't they? Yeah, I'm going to go with A. You could tell them to cut it out, and you could even like start counting to 10 and be like, stop at like 4 and 5 when it doesn't look like they're even getting ready to stop, and go, I mean it. I better not get to 10. Banks, Wall Street, you better knock it off. 5, 6, 8, you better stop it. I don't think that would work, though. Gregory Sherman. Is the Hagerstown mentioned in Stranger in a Strange Land, the same Hagerstown from which you hail? Yes, it is. Hagerstown, Maryland. I don't know if Robert Heinlein had ever actually been to Hagerstown, or if he just looked it up and was like, fuck it, that looks good. Do that. But yeah, Hagerstown, Maryland. That is the place. Zubul Sticks. Steve, what the fuck, man? I thought you liked to curse, but it's like I can't remember when I last heard you let slip a casual motherfucker or clusterfuck or whatever. What happened to you? What happened to me? I'm sorry that I don't curse like a fucking 13-year-old. Like, I don't curse enough to sate whatever sick desire to just hear random meaningless profanity that you might have. I'm so sorry that I don't swear enough for you. You know what? Here's a little profanity for you. Go fuck yourself. Zubul Sticks, whatever fucking kind of name that is. Is this what you want? Does this make you happy? You human bag of shit? I'm sorry, that was mean. I'm sorry. That was mean. I went too far. See, maybe that's why I don't swear as much. Because I go too far. I apologize, Zubul Sticks, and I think that's a fine name. It's a fine username. Yarrow Kassir, you ever think about instead of a baseball team cap, you could get a custom cap for your channel? Would Stuffy be the mascot? I guess Stuffy would be the choice to be the mascot if I was going to have one, but I think Stuffy might think that was weird. If I was just walking around all day with a hat with like Stuffy on it, I think Stuffy would be a little creeped out by that, and I don't want to make Stuffy uncomfortable. I think I make Stuffy uncomfortable enough as it is, without even meaning to. Kevin Francis Logan, oh, aren't we fancy? Will you ever do a striptease as part of the segue into the lightning round? I was actually thinking about doing one this time, and then I saw that you misspelled segue. Vitamin W, loving the new An Atheist Reads series. So, you are a Muslim now, or just a Muslim apologist? Lightning round question, go into as little detail as possible. Not a Muslim apologist. So little detail. Jim Nestor, Steve, do you think that the thawing of relations between the USA and Cuba, we might one day see a Cuban team in MLB? Maybe. I think that would be pretty cool and appropriate given the amount of talent that Cuba has given the major leagues over the years. What would be funny is if the major leagues granted like an expansion franchise to Cuba, to Havana, let's say, and then the team was all white guys. Wouldn't that be strange? Adrian Fournier, lightning round Q. Do you think the social studies deniers would consider feminism a real thing if NASA publishes an article on the subject? Because, it's really rocket science. Even if every honest person can see it had nothing to do with their perimeter of expertise. Irony point. No, I think if that ever happened, those people who reject social sciences and think that feminism is illegitimate would probably just start pissing and moaning about now how NASA has been taken over by feminazis and SJWs. I think that's what would be the response. They wouldn't all of a sudden go, oh, NASA thinks it's a real thing too. I guess we'll all just fall in line. Nope. Damn, the SJWs got to NASA. That would be the response. Radical Bacon, how'd the snow go? Man, well, the snow didn't go anywhere. The snow is still here. It's just hanging around outside like it owns the place. It wasn't bad. I mean, I'm a baby when it comes to snow, so I always whine about snowfall, and we did get a lot of it. We got over 2 feet. But it was fine. We stocked up beforehand, and everybody here works from home, so, you know, I didn't have to go anywhere. Could sort of sit and just be snowed in for a few days. It was fine. I mean, I whine about the weather and the snow, but it's not that bad, I guess. Hey, that's the last question. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to a deserving channel, and this week it's yet another one of my long overdue shout outs. This is a channel that's been on my list for quite some time, and the channel was actually kind of dormant for a while, but now he's starting to post new content. In the last few weeks he's posted a few new videos, and the channel belongs to Captain Obvious, also known as Bobo Thursday. You might know him better as Bobo Thursday, but his display name on his channel is now Captain Obvious. So one of those two. That's the guy I'm talking about. His channel was brought to my attention and recommended to me several years ago after I gave a shout out to Varmint Coyote, who is a friend of Bobo Thursday. Varmint recommended to me that I check out Bobo's channel, and I did, but for whatever reason I just never gave him a shout out. So now I'm giving Bobo Thursday a shout out. And he recently posted videos on drug testing welfare recipients and why that's kind of a daft idea, and also a really excellent recent video on concerns about how the Suicide Squad movie is sexualizing the character of Harley Quinn. And I thought that was a really interesting video too, and I am not a fan of Harley Quinn as a character in any form, but I thought that was a really interesting video that he made. And Captain Obvious, A.K.A. Bobo Thursday, and Varmint Coyote both recently also took part in a hangout with the Skeptic Feminist, which is mirrored on Bobo Thursday's channel as well as on the Skeptic Feminist channel, about MRAs and anti-feminists. That was also really interesting. So lots of awesome content from Bobo Thursday. Check out that channel. Highly recommended from yours truly. I also want to remind you, as always, to please check out the Lemme Listen podcasts. These are a set of podcasts created by my friend, you thought I was going to say another F word, didn't you? My friend, Jason Harding, the brilliant Jason Harding, the man behind Opinionville, and he also does this trio of podcasts. There's Lemme Finish that he does with Finite Atticus. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, an improv comedy podcast that just finished up its its first season last year and is getting ready for its second season right now. You can binge the whole thing and catch up on American Monsters, an awesome, awesome, funny show. And there is Late Seating, which Jason co-hosts with me. It's a movie review podcast where we talk about classic films. We give them a fresh look and decide whether or not we think a classic film deserves to be a classic, or a reviled bomb deserves to be rejected or dismissed. And we also make fun of them, whether we like them or not. It's a really fun show to do. I hope you guys listen to it and enjoy it. You can listen to all the episodes of Late Seating and all the episodes of American Monsters and Let Me Finish at LemmeListenPodcasts.com. Go there, check out the awesome podcasts. That's it for me, everybody. I am out of here for another week. Before I go, I want to remind you to please leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for next time, because in order for me to do this, you have to ask. It's the title. I think it's probably down there, actually. Anyway, you have to ask. So please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody. Oh, hello. Are you still here? Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it and share it and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.